Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eduardo Padrón, President Emeritus Miami-Dade College, Joseph Kenner, President and CEO, Graystone, Alan Blue, co-founder LinkedIn, and Bertina Ceccarelli, CEO, Empower.
Good afternoon, everyone. This panel will explore key dimensions towards building an inclusive workforce, and that includes digital skills matching, the connection between formal education and employment, non-traditional recruitment, and hiring practices at work. Our panelists will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the global workforce and how to harness the full potential of global human capital. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce the three outstanding panelists and leaders who are with us today, who have significant experience on the subject matter. So first, Joseph Kenner, President and CEO of Graystone. Joseph joined Graystone in 2018, and since then has delivered millions of dollars in economic impact through job placement and expanded employer relationships. He has an MBA from Pace University and also attended Williams College and Oxford University. Alan Blue is the co-founder of LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, he's responsible for overall product strategy. He also sponsors LinkedIn's work and education products within the economic growth team. Alan is a graduate of Stanford University. And last but certainly not least, Bertina Ceccarelli, CEO of Empower. Bertina joined Empower after very successful careers in both the private and nonprofit sectors. Empower is a national nonprofit dedicated to creating pathways to economic prosperity by facilitating digital careers for military, veterans, and underserved youth. Bertina has a BA in Industrial Engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, and an MBA from Harvard. So with no further ado, again, I'm going to start with the questions. And I'm going to ask the same question to the three panelists. And as we all know, COVID-19, the pandemic, has completely transformed the way we think about work and the workplace. So I want to ask each of you to please share your insights about the employment pipelines and the pandemic that the pandemic has illuminated. So maybe we start with Alan.
Sure thing. Thank you for the question. So at LinkedIn, obviously, we focus heavily on professional jobs and hiring. So most of our insights come from that realm. What we have seen is something that we are calling the Great Reshuffle. It's a moment when the pandemic has exposed workers to the ability and the necessity to work from home. It's led them to reevaluate things like their commutes, to think again about work-life balance, and has raised the possibility that people working from a great distance can be equally productive members of a team. So when we look at what the pandemic might allow, and might is the important word, we might be able to look for talent and skills in places we would never have considered before. So once upon a time, it was common wisdom that running an independent organization at a remote location was very hard and likely to fail. We don't believe that anymore. So if employers take advantage of this moment, they can look for skills in places they had never looked before. And we might see a renaissance of people being able to work from where they want and more people having more access to more opportunities.
Wonderful, thank you. Bertina, will you share your insights into this question?
Sure, and this really builds, I think, on what Alan is saying as well, but I'm seeing where I sit at Empower 3 shifts. Now, the first, I think we all know well, is that the pandemic hit hardest those individuals in low wage, low mobility jobs, especially women, and particularly women of color. And I think this amount of dislocation has also really demanded of people a rethink for what they're looking for from work, their relationship to work, and their employers. Part of it is certainly fair wages, but it's also flexibility, as Alan says, being able to work from multiple locations. It's security, it's training, and it's access to opportunity and growth. That's one shift. I think the second that we're seeing is certainly an acceleration of digital transformation and a more permanent move to hybrid and remote work is accelerating the demand for skills in cybersecurity, networking, cloud computing, and basic IT help desk support. So the third and final shift that I see brings these two things together, where companies are more open about not requiring a four-year degree, more open about accessing talent through alternative pipelines like Empower that provides the skills training, the certifications, and the professional development to those very workers who have been displaced. And I think it's those kind of sector-based skills programs, working closely with industry, that's going to help us meet the labor need and also help to bridge this widening gap of income inequality.
Great, thank you. Joseph?
Thank you, Dr. Padrón, and thank you to the folks at Concordia for having us. It's an interesting question, and since we're talking about inclusive employment pipelines, I should talk about who Graystone is. And Graystone is a hybrid social enterprise here in Southwest Yonkers. You might know us if you've ever had a pint of Ben & Jerry's chocolate fudge brownie or had one of our packaged brownies at Whole Foods. We make the brownie inclusions in those brownies every day to the tune of about 55,000 pounds a day. But it's not the brownies, that's the story. It's how we hire our bakers each and every day, and we do it through a model called open hiring, where we don't ask questions. It's inclusive hiring in its purest form. All folks have to do is put their name on a list, and when a job becomes available as a bakery apprentice, they get it. No questions asked, no background checks, no resumes. But what I would say here, particularly as it relates to not just COVID, right? It's really the whole social unrest of these the last 2 years. What has been exposed are the inequities in housing, the inequities in healthcare, and particularly, as part of this panel, employment. And whereas, Alan talked about the reshuffle and Bertina talked about the rethinking, I think what's happening now is a whole reassessment that's going on in terms of employers as well as employees. They're both having this reassessment. And, right now we're seeing this, all these news about folks talking about this employee shortage. I don't believe there is one. I think there is an employer outage in terms of how we're looking for our employees, where we're looking for our employees. And obviously, shameless plug for Graystone and inclusive hiring is there has to be a more innovative approach to how we're looking at bringing in folks into our organization, and particularly looking at those folks who have been traditionally excluded from employment. We're looking at a situation now where we have about 8 to 9 million unemployed and another 10 million that have left the labor force altogether because they have barriers, while at the same time we have 10 million unfilled jobs. So clearly there is a disconnect, and this is the reason why I think there is this great reassessment of employment right now.
Thank you. One of the questions that I hear most often, especially from business leaders, it's how should businesses be preparing for a post-pandemic workforce? And I would add that what are the new considerations that should leaders keep in mind when aiming for an inclusive workplace? I think that's perhaps the most important aspect of this. So let me start with Bertina.
Yeah, so, look, I think a consideration, first and foremost, as employers ease out of this pandemic, is to be prepared for a fierce competition of talent, and to really be far more intentional about investment in not only recruiting, particularly from diverse communities, but also the commitment to onboarding, training, mentoring, and especially the sort of development opportunities to be able to help individuals rise and gain greater mobility within their organizations. So I think that's really fundamental. And, we're seeing some progress with companies who are really leveraging their employee resource groups differently, rethinking their recruitment pipelines to access diverse and inclusive talent. But I would also say companies will really need to think about, in light of so many announcements that were very bold and ambitious made during this pandemic about efforts to address racial inequities, I think we're going to need a conversation about what were some of the outcomes of those announcements, and what have we learned as a society? What have companies learned? And is there a willingness to really share best practices so that we can come up with greater collaborative solutions, since these are problems that no one organization alone, I think, can solve?
Great. Joseph, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it really goes back to the original question about what has COVID and the social unrest taught us. And from an inclusive employment perspective, it's about looking at employment more holistically. And Bertina kind of outlined it all together, is, what are the investments that we need to make now in our workforce? People feeling safe. Do they feel there is a career pathway within my organization? Does my company even care? Are they empathetic about me? These are the things that employers need to be thinking about. And again, talking about employment, what do you really need from an employee? Bertina touched on it. Do you really need the BA? Do you really, all these other barriers I would say we put up to keep folks out? Again, going back to investing in talent, how do we reallocate some of those costs that we're spending keeping people out? What can we do to take those same costs, those same resources, and use those to keep people in and invest in all of those other things, career pathways, bringing folks in, training? Those are the types of things that people are looking for now. And I think that is part of this whole great reassessment that's happening right now in the labor force.
Alan, do you agree?
I do. One thing which was true before the pandemic and before the nationwide conversation that we had in the United States about racial equity was that the companies that were successful in making progress were the ones who had committed at the very highest level to make that progress. The pandemic has given all of us, through this great reshuffle, an opportunity to hire a lot of people. And now is a time when we have new tools and capabilities, and we can begin to take that commitment to a new level. So we can begin to think of alternative pathways. We can begin to reevaluate what we're actually judging candidates on. We can begin to think about setting up environments for remote work. The number of tools we have and the number of opportunities we have has grown spectacularly as we watch people move and reshuffle into new lines of employment. So if you as a company have made that commitment and you want to make progress on inclusivity, now is a great time.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Thank you. So what can you ladies and gentlemen and lady tell me about the new technologies and strategies that have been implemented to ensure that employees are equipped with the necessary tools and skills? Alan, maybe we can begin with you.
So I really want to draw attention to one, and both Joseph and Bertina have brought it up, and that is there are alternatives to the bachelor's degree for hiring. So one project we have done at LinkedIn, and we've seen it replicated by other companies, and it's something that we're beginning to roll out as a product that we offer to our customers, is something we call Skills Path. So Skills Path says that instead of looking for a bachelor's degree, say you're hiring customer service agents, instead of looking for a bachelor's degree on the way to that particular role, actually let's put together a package of recruiting and education which come together. And if I complete that education, it's not a bachelor's degree, it's a set of skill training methods, then that's somebody who we're going to give a chance. That ability before the pandemic was aimed at hiring tech roles, which are hard to fill. But now it's something you can apply to every single role that actually exists out there. There are new ways of thinking about it. we certainly we as a company are certainly ready to help you as an employer achieve those goals.
Thank you. Bertina, how you feel about that?
Yeah, well, where my mind goes, and it's interesting because I think most certainly we're big proponents of alternative pathways that don't necessarily always include a college degree. And one of the things I see companies really leaning into more and more is the tuition reimbursement. So as students are coming from those alternative pipelines, they have the opportunity in a more nonlinear way to get their college degree. But the other thing that I see, and it's really not necessarily a new strategy, in fact, it's quite old and well perfected by our European colleagues, but it's reinvented, I think, for the modern age, which is the apprenticeship program. And we're seeing increasingly a number of our corporate partners at Empower reinventing the apprenticeship for non-traditional occupational clusters like tech positions, where our corporate partners will hire students who have gone through our 16-week technology fundamental basics program. And then during a 6 to 12-month apprenticeship program, really lean into those company specific skills in partnership with Empower, whether that's project management or software development, so that by the end of the 12 months, this is a candidate who's been proven, who can convert to a full-time employee, or if not, they now have the resume building, they've got the skills development where we can place them comfortably in any number of other corporate environments. So, I see that trend continuing because it's a great way to address the concerns so many companies have, which is, I need experienced candidates. Well, here's a way to get the experience from candidates who are really, really interested in being a part of your company.
Okay, Joseph, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and we're talking about business, so we should really look at the data and kind of let the data lead us and show why this is important for business. We recently launched the Graystone Employment Opportunity Center, and part of our charge of that center was to have the open hiring and inclusive hiring models be replicated. We're probably the one organization that does not want to be unique. We want other folks to be doing what we're doing. So we are seeing folks like The Body Shop, folks like Rhino Foods, adopting these models in their distribution centers, in their retail operations, in the case of The Body Shop. And what folks are seeing, what businesses are seeing, so here's the ROI of it, 2/3 cut in their turnover rate. They're seeing 13% productivity increase, time to hire going from 30 days to 5 to 7. That's resources, that's money, that's time that the businesses are now recouping. That's productivity, getting products and services out the door by using folks that traditionally would have been excluded or deemed unemployable, and in our case were deemed essential last year. Those are the types of things that we're now seeing, and I think this is the wave of the future. And the one thing I would say, it's very basic yet profound. The one thing that we as business leaders have at our disposal, the one lever that we control, is our ability to hire. So we have that power to rethink and redo how we're doing things, and taking a look at the traditional models and challenging them and asking questions and having a mind shift. And it's great that if there's one positive thing that came out of these last 2 years, it is that the reshuffle, as Alan says, or reassessment, as I like to say, that's happening right now, because folks are looking at different ways of doing things, particularly when it comes to employment and inclusive employment in particular.
Thank you. Well, before we started this session, Bertina asked me whether I was optimistic about the future. And now I'm going to turn the question on three of you. I'd like to, for the three of you, to be able to comment on how you see us moving into the future and what contributions organizations like the ones you lead can play in making sure that we have a more equitable, more inclusive society, and where the workforce is really prepared to remain competitive, because we all know that our ability as a nation to maintain our leadership position will totally depend on our talent and how we harness that talent and how we become more competitive. And that is something that a lot of people worry about. So whoever wants to start.
I mean, I could start, and I would say, Dr. Padrón, the one thing that gives me hope, one, is we're having this discussion right now. in front of a global audience. And I've been a part of these discussions with many other groups over the last 2 years. So one, leaders across this globe are actually talking about this issue and are looking at different models and different approaches to things. I sit on the board of Conscious Capitalism and the B team, and it is great to see so many different business leaders like the folks on this panel talking about it. So I'm excited about where we're going.
Yeah, I am too. And I have to say, I'm seeing increasing innovation. In fact, I think the same level of energy and thoughtfulness around innovating on new products and new categories is now being applied to innovation around talent development. And not only coming from HR departments, but it's coming from technology departments and product management and other parts of the sector that's saying, we have to get our arms around this and find new ways and new partners. Thank
you. Alan, you have the last word.
Very briefly, we are we're at a moment, as I said earlier, where we can make, where we're going to have to make some choices. And because we're having conversations like this, I think we can make choices which aim towards a more inclusive future. So let's take advantage of the moment.
Thank you. Well, our time is up. So I want to thank the three of you for your brilliant presentations today and to the audience for participating and listening to it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.